In this video, I'm going to show you my favorite 2D animation exercise for complete beginners. We'll be animating these floating balls flying across the screen. This exercise is perfect for beginners because it's very easy to do, but also a lot of fun. Even if you've already started learning and practicing 2D animation, this might be a wonderful exercise for you to train you to do very smooth animation that gently and elegantly speeds up and slows down. I'll be demonstrating step by step how to do this exercise in a free software called OpenToonz. So what are we waiting for? Let's do this exercise together. This exercise is part of a larger 2D animation class you can find on our YouTube channel. Yeah, so let's get started. The first thing we see here is the OpenToonz startup screen. The sandbox project that comes with OpenToonz is totally enough to get started. Just type in a scene name and then we're good to go. We're gonna fetch our brush tool from the toolbar, which is hidden up here. But before you can start to draw, you need to create the right kind of layer. I want to work on vector layers rather than bitmap layers. To do that, you can click on the vector level symbol down here to create a vector drawing level. You can double check it in this drop down. Just hit OK and it will create your first drawing level for you. Personally, I always want to work with vectors, so I go to the preferences and in the preferences select drawing and set the default level type to vector level. The first thing that we're going to do is plan the path that the floating balls are traveling on. This is something that you should actually try to make a habit, that you plan the path for certain elements of your animation. You could be tracking the hips or the head of your character. It can be very important to track like the arc of the hand to get a very smooth motion. Here you can see me experimenting with different paths, and yeah, your path should have a couple peaks and valleys. I have this spiral thing somewhere in the middle because I want to have a really fast path here during the spiral, and one sharp corner like this one because we're going to do something very special here, and in the end it should connect to where it started. I was already very content with this path here, but I wanted to tweak it a little bit. Thankfully, we are on a vector level where we can just edit the brush strokes that we already created very easily by activating the control point editor right here. The control point editor allows you to see all those edge points. And first, I want to get rid of some points here at the end of my path. I just click on them and hit the delete key on my keyboard. Now I can click on this edge point and grab it and place it so that the both ends connect. And you can use the secondary tangent handles here to change how the line flows through the different edge points. And this way we can create a very smooth shape up here. As a rule of thumb, to get really smooth lines, there should be an edge point at every peak and valley, and then you can use the tangents to create very smooth transitions. But also don't worry if your line looks already fine and how you want it, but there are a lot of edge points, just leave them be. Only clean up the line in places where you really need it to create these big sweeping arcs. I'm going to fix some points specifically in this spiral to make sure that it is very round and very smooth, and yeah, tweak my line until I am content. The motion path that we drew here is of course only a guideline. We need to create the actual animation on a separate layer. We want to see this motion path as a guideline throughout the entire animation, so you can click on your drawing and with the gray handle here, just drag it open to make sure that we see it for a lot of frames. To get another layer on top of this, all we have to do is to click on the Create Vector Level icon and hit OK in this dialog box. And there we have the first frame of our ball animation. My brush is a bit too thick here, so I go up in the brush settings here and make it a lot thinner. And there's one more thing I want to change for our path layer. On the column, click on this arrow to the left and bring down the opacity. This way, we see much better which line belongs to our ball layer and which line belongs to the guide layer. Because this is a vector level, I can use the select tool to click on a line and then tweak it with this bounding box and maybe move it, position it just the way that I want it to be. Now we can finally start what most people think animation is, which is drawing the individual frames of your animation. There's one thing though that I want to make clear right from the beginning. Planning your animation, like we just did with the path of the motion, that is already animation. Don't get impatient and be like, oh, I'm just planning. I want to get to draw the actual frames. I want to get to draw the actual in-betweens. Don't be impatient with that. Good planning is a huge part of your animation. You're doing something right if most of your animation time is planning. And this brings us to one of the biggest animation mistakes that you can make as a beginner, is to just start drawing frames that are randomly different from the frame before. As you can see, I have a gap between every frame, but there's no pattern, there's no thought behind how big these spacings between the individual frames are. And this is a mistake. As an animator, you should be in control of your spacings. They should follow a certain specific pattern that help you control how the motion feels. We want our animation to feel very smooth, and a big key to that is to have your motion speed up gradually. Animators measure the speed of their animation with the spacing. So a bigger spacing means that you have a faster motion, a smaller spacing from one frame to another means that you have a slower motion. And by gradually increasing the spacings between every frame, we make sure that our animation speeds up. Traditionally, animators plan their spacings using a timing chart like this one, which indicates how the spacing increases and decreases. Here we have a timing chart that is right next to the animation. It's on scale 1:1. I just draw my drawings under it, and you can see that the spacings in the timing chart more or less exactly correspond with the actual drawing. If you get a little bit more advanced, you don't have to draw your timing chart into the image like this. You can just make it on the side in a very small scale or on an extra piece of paper, which is what I usually do when I animate digitally. I draw on my drawing tablet and I have a little notepad to the side where I put in my timing charts. It's also very common to write frame numbers next to your timing chart to be like, okay, this motion starts at frame 9 and then it ends at frame 27. It becomes a painting by numbers game. You know that frame 21 is like an ease out frame because you can see it on the timing chart and you know exactly what you have to do for every single frame. Of course, for beginners, that's a little bit difficult because you don't have a feeling for timing yet so much. You don't know just from the top of your head how long a motion should take. By the way, even nowadays, I still have to experiment with that. I have to try multiple timings sometimes to feel out what duration I want my motion to be. So for now, you don't need to plan anything with frame numbers in advance. We're just gonna discover the timing as we go. So for now, let's draw the timing chart directly into the picture. Let's say we have 3 points on this first portion of our arc where we want our ball to speed up from and slow down into. Now, the way to plan this is to always have the spacings going from the middle. So here you can see me going, well, not precisely at the half, but I like to do like a third kind of thing sometimes to divide up this spacing between the middle and the starting keyframe. And we go in between that and half it again, and maybe half it again. And there we have our increasing pattern of spacings planned. Now the ball doesn't have to slow down going into the valley here, but if we want it to slow down, we can half this distance again, half it again, and there we have it slowing down when it reaches the valley of this path. And we can plan the rest of the spacings accordingly, just keep halving the distances so you get a nice speeding up and slowing down spacing pattern. I want to make sure that I always see the timing chart, so I put it on a different layer. I can use the select tool with the freehand setting to just draw a freehand lasso around it, and then I can copy and paste it on a new layer. Of course, we can create a new layer like we did before, just using that button, and there we can paste the timing chart into. We can extend the exposure to make sure that we see it for a good while. Next up, we're going to activate something called onion skin by creating those red and green dots next to the timeline handle. With onion skin activated, you can see the previous drawings shining through in red and the following drawings shining through in green, seen from the position of the playhead. You can quickly deactivate and activate onion skin by double clicking on the red and green ball at the top of your timeline handle. Now let's go back to our ball layer. We can make sure that the middle of the ball lines up with the line on the timing chart. For this animation, the timing chart's always marking the middle of our ball. Now let's go to the next frame, either by clicking on the frame right next to the first frame we already created, or by using the right arrow key on your keyboard. And here you can see onion skin in action. Because we marked the previous frame with a red dot, you can now see the starting position of the ball shining through. And if we now draw anything, it creates a second drawing on the timeline. It's fairly close to the first drawing. We can use the select tool to tweak the shape and position. Now you can go to the third frame using the right arrow key and draw your third drawing. This time the spacing has notably increased. And now we just need to keep increasing the spacings. I'm using the select tool to select the drawing and place it so that the center aligns with the timing chart. Now we're at the fastest part of this motion. This is the spacing as big as it gets in this part. This is the full speed that it will have during this way down. To emphasize this, I'm going to stretch the ball a little bit. Some elements in real life, they actually do stretch when they go at full speed. But there's also another reason why you would do that in a 2D animation is to create the illusion of motion blur. If you record something with a camera and you go really fast, you have it getting blurry, and this kind of elongates the object. So that's the reason why even if you have an object that doesn't actually stretch, it could make sense to elongate it a little bit during fast frames. Now, this animation here isn't going particularly fast. These spacings are kind of close together still. I just want to explain the concept to you here. One thing you could pay attention to is to keep the volume of the object. A system that works for me quite well to keep volumes is to put something inside of the volume that I want to keep. We put 4 marbles in this ball. And now if I want to stretch this ball very much, I just use the same amount of marbles. And this way I make sure that I more or less keep the volume of this ball. One thing that you want to avoid is to stretch it like this, where, where does all this extra space come from? This is not realistic. In hindsight, I think I'm going a little too quickly here in the fully stretched out shape. I think the frame before could have already been stretched a tiny little bit to make the transition less jarring, because, now it's keeping the volume, and then all of a sudden it's stretching. I think the transition could be a little more gradual. But basically, this is now all you need to know to continue. We always go to the next frame and put a new drawing there following our timing chart. And here in the valley of this particular motion, I'm doing something interesting. I'm copy and pasting the ball from our very first frame. This way, I make sure that our ball doesn't randomly grow and shrink, because it can easily happen that if you start doing an animation like this, that at the very end, your ball has a completely different size because you gradually change the size without realizing it. Later, if you have a more complex character, you could always put a model sheet in a separate layer under your drawing to make sure that your character didn't morph into a different shape. In our case, our first frame is our model sheet that I occasionally copy paste to make sure that I keep the volume of the ball approximately the same throughout the entire animation. A word of warning, if you're using OpenToonz for the first time and you haven't watched our beginner's tutorial about it, do not copy paste the drawings from the timeline by clicking in the timeline and hitting Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V, because these copies, they are actually linked. They are the same drawings in multiple instances. I explained that in greater detail in said beginner tutorial. What you should do instead is you should go to frame 1, to that drawing that you want to copy from, and in the viewport, select the lines that you want to copy, either by using the select tool or by hitting Ctrl+A, and then you can copy that with Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V, paste it into a new frame somewhere else on the timeline. And this way you will get an actual new drawing that is not linked to another instance of that frame. So yeah, that's a little speciality of OpenToonz. It can save you a lot of work reusing frames and keeping them linked, but in this case, we don't want to keep the link, and that can be a little bit confusing if you do it wrong. And from here, we're speeding it up again. This time I'm a lot more content with how I went into the stretched shape. And then, yeah, we gradually decrease it again until we come to a stop at the top of this peak. Once again, to make sure that I keep the volume of the ball the same, I copy and paste it from the very first drawing we did, and I paste it on the keyframe where the ball is at the peak. And yeah, now we can reward ourselves with having a look at how this animation plays. In the timeline, you can switch off our guide layers. Just click on the eye and the drawing desk icon for our timing chart layer and the motion path layer to make them invisible. The eye makes them invisible in the export, and the animation desk icon makes them invisible in our preview window that we are seeing the animation in right now. You can click on the play button under the viewport to play your animation. And can you feel this effect of how the ball gradually speeds up and slows down again? It gives you this very pleasing smoothness in the motion. Wow, this tutorial is getting a lot longer than I anticipated it being. Thank you so much for watching it up to this point. If you liked what you're seeing so far and you want to support me, please hit that like button. It's just one click, but it helps me a lot. Another way to support us is to buy merch from our store. For example, this bouncing ball mug, which features a bunch of balls with different spacings. Now that you know all about that, you might appreciate this. We also have a Patreon that you can join to support us. And one of the options is a group mentoring tier where you can join a monthly group call and bring your work in progress, animation, character design, story idea, and get feedback from a professional mentor like me on how to improve it and how to improve your animation skills. So as you can see, there are a bunch of ways to support us and to get awesome stuff in return. And in any case, there will always be the free videos here on YouTube. So let's get back to the tutorial. Depending on how many segments you put into your timing chart, your motion might be a little bit too fast. And a very good way to slow down your animation is to put it from ones to twos. Ones means that there is a new drawing on every single frame on the timeline, which is what we have been doing so far. This gives you the full 24 frames per second experience to create very smooth, very fluent animation. But it also is a lot of work, because if you draw 24 frames per second, you have a lot of frames to draw. In most television animation, animators only animate 12 frames per second, and then they go to 24 frames per second if they have something that needs to be really fast. So how do you do that? How do you convert 24 frames per second to 12 frames per second? Very easy. You just show one drawing for 2 frames. You put it on twos. we can select all the drawings on the timeline that we have just done and use this button over here to tell OpenToonz to convert it from being on ones to being on twos, meaning that every drawing is now held for 2 frames. This will make our animation a lot slower. I like the slower timing here very much. Especially because we're gonna go really fast in another part of our animation. So I think I wanna keep it like that. I wanna keep it on twos. It also might be a good challenge for you as a beginner animator to experiment more with slower movements, because beginners tend to make their motions a little bit too fast. So making it a habit to not be lazy and have a bunch of drawings where they are needed to create a slower motion is a very good habit. You can always take frames away. You will see me later on tweaking the animation by taking frames away. It often is easier to take frames away than to be like, oh, now I have to draw even more frames. At least during like the planning, scribbling phase. Of course, it doesn't make any sense to draw clean drawings of your animation and then throw them away. And now let's have some fun with it. Just draw the next frame without drawing the timing chart first. You should still be doing the same thing, increasing the spacing while your ball is speeding up and decreasing the spacings when it's supposed to slow down. But, you know, if you have a simple object, a simple animation like this, you don't have to draw a timing chart. You can directly draw the ball 1 frame after another. And this kind of chronologically in order animation is called straight ahead animation. The opposite of that is called pose to pose animation, where you would first plan the most important poses of your animation and then think about how you get from one pose to another. But we're not doing this kind of planning yet. This kind of animation is often used for very physics-based movement of objects or elements. For example, if you would have an explosion or something broke off somewhere and is now just falling to the ground or being deflected, flying through the air, you can animate this like that, along a motion path, going frame by frame, maybe rotating it a little bit or something like this, having some fun with stuff flying through the air. And it's really cool to do this straight ahead because it's almost like you're experiencing the motion in slow motion because you're going with it 1 frame after the other. And I feel like that's a very interesting way to feel your animation. By the way, I keep animating on ones for now because in OpenToonz you can just switch it to be on twos with just 1 click. So, because it's more convenient, I just draw 1 frame after the other, and then later I select those frames and tell them to be on twos. There could also be a phase in your animation where the ball isn't speeding up anymore. You can see that here, where these spacings are roughly the same because the ball is just holding that speed. And now we've reached the point where our ball speeds up going through the spiral. And there are 2 things that are very important for this animation if we want the ball to go very fast through the spiral. To recognize that our shape is a circle, we need to have a frame at the top, the right, the bottom, and the left. You could maybe also get away with like putting it into 3 parts and having a lot of smear. But there is the danger here that if we remove too many frames, we can no longer follow the path that the ball took. And then because we want this motion to be really fast, I leave these drawings on ones. And that immediately doubles the speed that the ball is going through the spiral. And then when it comes out of the spiral, I'm slowing it down to be on twos again. The next unusual thing that I want to show you that we're doing with this animation is here at this sharp corner. First, we ease in, as always, we ease into this position with decreasing the spacings. We've done this a couple of times, so far so good. But now to get the motion started again, we're not just increasing the spacings, we're doing an anticipation first, which means we leave the motion path to go into the opposite direction first and then slingshot it back onto the motion path. The timing chart at the right is how we go from the hold position into the anticipation extreme, and then the one on the left is how we go from the extreme into the motion along the motion path. After we've planned it in that way, all we have to do is to animate it accordingly. And here we have a part where after a while it reaches like a speed that it stays in, which is why the spacings no longer increase or decrease. We have a couple frames where the spacing is just the same. And then we end our animation by easing into the end position, which is also our first frame, our starting position. And this way we now have a loop. And now just make sure that all the things that you want to be on twos are converted to be on twos. The only animation that I have on ones is during the spiral. And now if you make sure that the exposure of all the layers end at the same time, we can set this up as a loop. And now you can click on the loop button here to have your animation start over again once it's finished. And yeah, loops are a nice thing. I like seeing an animation on repeat like that. I'm a perfectionist, so I see a couple of moments where I feel like, this is going a little bit too slow. And now, as I mentioned, it's fairly easy to kick out a couple frames. You need to be careful that you still have an easing pattern that makes sense. It should really only slow down in moments where you want it to slow down. Very often that's at the peak or the valley of the motion path. But you can also kick some frames out and still have a increasing or decreasing spacing pattern. Or you could also remove one of the stops where we had the ball slow down and then speed up again by selecting those frames on the timeline. And there are a couple of frames like 4, 5, 6. Delete them and just make sure that where the stop used to be, you still have a frame, so you have the same spacing to the left and the right, and you have the ball just speeding through that former stop. Right now, the single ball is a little bit lonely, so let's give him a body by copy and pasting the entire layer, which will copy and paste all the frames, the entire animation. The way to do this is you select the layer, the entire layer with the ball animation, hit Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V, and there you have a second layer that is exactly the same. First, let's offset them in time so that one ball starts moving earlier than the other. To do that, you click on the entire stack of drawings at the darker bar at the top, and you drag the entire stack over 4 frames. And this is how it looks when you hit play. You can see that they have a slight offset, but come to a stop and start in the same exact location. To change that, we can also offset them in space. Just use the animate tool up here, make sure that you have set it to position mode, and then click and drag to move the entire layer with all drawings over to the right. You can see that your position data is stored in a transformation keyframe down here. We have another video where I go into greater detail how this kind of interpolated keyframe motion tween animation works. So check that out if you want to learn how to animate your drawings without actually having to redraw them. And if we now hit play, you can see that they are offset both in time and in space. Here in the first frame, we have a little bit of a problem. We don't have a drawing here because we dragged all the drawings over. There's a gap. To do something against that, just copy and paste the first frame with Ctrl+C and Ctrl+V and fill up the gap. Here our drawing shifted a bit. I correct that. Now you can select this whole area, right click and select fill in empty cells. And there we have the gap closed. We have drawing 1 now held until it's time for drawing 2. We have a similar problem at the end of the animation. Here the exposure for ball number 1 already ended. All we have to do is click on that drawing and extend the exposure. Just to keep everything in order, I also click and drag that keyframe where we have the position data stored back to the first frame of our animation. I just want to keep it organized because that is the only keyframe that we have for this layer. I want to keep it on frame 1. I'm also experimenting more with the position that I want the second ball to be in, because sometimes I don't like how the balls overlap. But yeah, I'll play around with this a little more towards the rest of the animation process. Yeah, as you can see here, I'm adjusting it once again. If you change the position, make sure that you're always on frame 1, because whenever you move the layer with the animate tool, it will store the position data to that keyframe that now should be on frame 1. If you're anywhere else in the timeline, it will create a new keyframe over there. Once again, if you're interested to find more about keyframes, watch that other video that I mentioned. And yeah, but I think I like this one. So we're going to keep one of the balls to the left. To make our animation look a little bit nicer, we can fill our ball in a color of our choice. Just go over to the color swatch panel, add a new style is what OpenToonz calls it. Change the color to a color of your choice. The really cool thing about OpenToonz is that these colors stay linked if you're using vector layers. So later on, even after you've filled all the frames, all the drawings, you can still change the color swatch. And every place where you use that color swatch will also change. And the other cool thing is, if we color the ball on one of the layers, it will also color the ball on the other layer, because these are the same drawings, just offset a little bit on the timeline and they're still linked. Isn't that wonderful? So I select this nice blue over here and I get the fill tool to fill one frame after the other. Sometimes I didn't close my shape. I left a couple of gaps here and there, and I use the contour point editor to change my control points to make sure that the shape of the ball is closed. And now it's a lot easier for the fill tool to fill these shapes. And there we have the animation with 2 colorful balls bouncing around on the screen. Yeah, to get a third ball, you have to do what we already did to get the second ball. Just copy and paste an entire layer, offset all the drawings, and make sure that the beginning and end don't have any gaps there. Make sure that your animation always ends with the same frame that it started with, to make sure, that everything connects as a loop. But what if we want the balls to have separate colors? You will realize if you change the color swatch, it will change the color everywhere in every drawing. So what can we do about that? We need to break the link of the drawings. We need to make sure that the drawings on the different layers are not from the same level stack of drawings. First, you need to know what file the drawings of your ball are stored in. Click on any drawing of the ball's drawing layer, and up here in the level panel, you see that all these drawings belong to a level called B. In my case, it's the letter B. It could be for you that it is another letter. You also have the chance to name a level stack while you create a new drawing level. But yeah, this is what I need to keep in mind, that all my drawings are stored in a file with the file name B. Go to File, Save All to make sure that all your drawings are safely stored in one of these files that we are going to copy. Open your File Explorer or Finder and go to the project location. If you're working in the Sandbox project, this is where you can find it on Windows, and there you will find a folder called Drawings. In there is a file called b.pli. All I have to do now is to copy and paste this file 2 times, and I can name it something else, whatever I want, so that I can later load these drawings into OpenToonz. Now I have 3 files and they all include the same drawings, but now we can color them differently in each of these files. And the way to do that is make sure that you have all the drawings selected of your second ball layer. go up here into the level menu and choose replace level. And now you're going to replace all the drawings here with the drawings from one of your copied files. Click on replace, and it doesn't look like anything changed, but if you click on the drawings now or hover over it, you can see that these drawings come from the level stack B2. Now do the same for the third ball. Make sure that you load your third copy into that drawing level. And now you have your animation 3 times, but this time they're all separate drawing stacks and can be edited separately. And that's what we're doing now. Go into the level palette of your second ball layer, and you can see if we change the color now, this ball changes the color independently from all the others. You can do the same thing for layer number 3. Because all the drawings and all the colors are still linked within the level, you changed the color in all of the animation frames at once. And if you hit play, you now have 3 colorful balls flying across the screen. Congratulations, you made it to the end. Thank you so much for watching. If you now want to learn even more, we have a premium tutorial that you can watch on Skillshare or purchase on our website about how to do a fun morph animation in OpenToonz. This might be a good exercise to learn a little bit more of a pose-to-pose approach to animation. And yeah, there always will be more free tutorials here on YouTube, so just please subscribe to never miss one of these. And I have to say it again, we have a Patreon. These are the wonderful people that support me there. Thank you so very much. You make videos like this possible. If you want to join them and also help me to make more content more frequently, then please consider donating on Patreon. In any case, I hope this exercise was helpful. Have a fantastic day and keep on animating.